Thank you for inviting me. I was so pleased to see Raymond with his big, very old-fashioned manuscript like this, because that's what I have too. I'm on the right track. Thank you, Europabevegelsen, for launching this day today in November. I think it's a good time to celebrate Europe Day in November rather than on May 9, celebrating a day in 1950 when Schuman presented his plan for European coal and steel community. A Europe Day on November 9 would signify something that we all have a connection to. It would signify that Europe was not built by middle-aged men in dark suits. Well, I mean, I'm also middle-aged. I don't have a dark suit, but it would signify that Europe is built by people wanting change. When US President Ronald Reagan asked Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev to tear down that wall, Gorbachev didn't really take cue. Civil society did, however. And these days, we are celebrating the 25 years of the fall of the wall. Because democracy in Europe is not constructed by one president talking to another, but by civil society tearing down old walls and building new bridges between citizens. Civil society and European institutions need each other. They legitimize each other. Civil society needs the EU to amplify and ground their wishes across 28 member states. And if it includes the EEA, so much the better. Because civil society work is not limited to that of member states, nation states. The more partners, the merrier. Norwegian organizations, please take note. The EU institutions, on the other hand, need civil society as a direct link to citizens. They need their expertise from the field. They need their connections with the grassroots. And the better the two sides learn to work with each other, the shorter the distance between citizens and Brussels. So the voice of civil society has become a fundamental tool for democratic governance in Europe. Since 1989, civil society organizations have surged and found new strength in providing a voice for citizens. In the new member states, they were off to a shaky start because for so long they had been thwarted. Civil society is what oppressors clamped down on first, explains the American historian Anne Applebaum in her chilling account, Iron Curtain, The Crushing of Eastern Europe. Today, though, there are several reasons for this revived force of civil society. I will name 5 of them. Firstly, we have lost faith in traditional party politics. Sorry, Raymond. We are less impressed with the political elites and the formal establishment. Need I mention the turnout to the European elections? Raymond said 211 million European citizens did not vote. We feel less comfortable with traditional political parties. So there are other etiquettes that better define us. Well, maybe Professor Hylland Eriksen will tell us more about those etiquettes later. Well, Christian Democrats and socialists and liberals, they don't really fit the whole bill as we are as individuals today. And some find that populist parties fill that gap. Others are more confident in the work of NGOs. They are viewed as less corrupt and less elitist. For democracy movements on the ground in Europe's neighbor countries, it is reportedly easier to accept and trust help from sister or brother organizations than a top-down visit from a formal representative of an EU country or an European official. Second reason, the new EU treaty has taken this fatigue of traditional party politics into account and has provided several new tools for civil society to work with Europe. I'll come back to those tools later. Thirdly, financial crisis has put a strain on government budgets. Welfare is faring less well, but the need is still huge. So civil society plugs the holes where formal society organizations have withdrawn. The help organization Caritas is feeding over 1 million Spaniards from their food banks. And just imagine that there was no Salvation Army, no Red Cross or Refugee Council taking the baton during the cold winter months for homeless in Norway. Imagine the Ebola crisis without the international medical associations on the ground, and imagine climate talks without the input of Greenpeace or maybe Bellona. The fourth reason is that internet and social media create the possibility to work across borders and to form a critical mass of opposition quickly and efficiently. The organizations are thus in the possession of powerful means to whip up massive support for their cause. The biggest influence in Europe is among civil organizations is probably the animal welfare organizations or those lobbies. They have also were very early on to use social media to whip up support for their causes. Trans-European, with trans-European lists. And internet can also provide an impressive piggy bank of money through crowdfunding. So imagine if the European Commission organized their funding for civil society a little bit along the lines of crowdfunding, funding like GoFundMe or First Giving, rather than the bewildering applications that are demanded today. 5, the fifth reason for civil society's revival is a change in the way we want to live. Extreme individualism with its set economic structures is being challenged, partly out of economic necessity. Instead, we have a new growth in collective practices. Aided by social media, this has created a surge in shared practices, such as carpooling, sharing your home, as in couch surfing, parenting networks, urban gardens. They're just some examples of how civil society is reshaping our way of living and thinking about each other. These practices are sure enough commercialized by smart applications and websites, but the idea often sprung from a need demonstrated by civil society groups. I got invited just today to an event taking place in Brussels today, where a new Europe-wide association of groups with different sharing practices is meeting with the European institutions. They're presenting their case and, most likely, asking for funding. This new civil society movement is called Cooperland. I'm pretty sure they will be listened to. The network's organizations come from 6 different European countries, and it's just waiting for more members to join to make their voice stronger. So in Europe today, we may complain about democratic deficit. Every speaker today, apart from Raymond, has so far. We may complain about a lack of legitimacy among the faceless bureaucrats. And we may show a lukewarm interest in the elections to European Parliament. But let's step out of our ivory tower a little bit and, for example, ask a Portuguese factory seamstress if her working conditions and rights are better preserved today thanks to EU laws, and ask a Polish gay man if he feels better protected than before Poland became a member of the European Union. Ask the founders of the African Union where they get their inspiration from for creating their cooperation. I'm pretty sure that the answer you will get is a resounding support of the EU as a defender of liberties and democracy. Because democracy and human rights are among the EU's most successful export products. The best bet has often been to strengthen civil society on the ground. Observers say that one of the main reasons for the successful transformation of Tunisia into a vibrant democracy is a strong civil society. That goes for most of Europe's activities in third countries. Supporting the civil society is a cheap and efficient means for stabilizing a country's walk on the path to democracy. And the EU does need that input for their policy making. It makes it legitimate. Ideas from civil society render their decisions legitimate. So the EU has to listen to civil society out of self-preservation. It's a direct hand between the institutions and the citizens, the civil society. So the decision makers in Brussels have understood this and created, therefore, in the Lisbon Treaty, a concrete tool to formalize this link. It's called the Citizens' Initiative. Simply put, gather 1 million signatures across Europe and you can put forward a proposal for a new law. I put it simply, but I tell you, it's not simple. This is Europe after all, this is Brussels. The initiative is surrounded by a jungle of jaw-dropping bureaucratic rules and conditions, and it also actually makes the initiative rather expensive. €1 million you have to cough up for that initiative. But don't let that depress you, because the Citizens' Initiative still leads the way. And if you don't go all the way, or your money run out, just make the initiative yourself, and it will stir action, I'm pretty sure. Some of the lobbies, just taste that hateful word, have done just that in Brussels. Lobby and democracy, is that even possible to mention in the same breath? But yeah. Organizations defending citizens' rights are present in Brussels and find that they can push legislation in their direction. The Scandinavian temperance movement has greatly influenced EU alcohol policy with their lobbying in Brussels, for example. The EU institutions are not only obliged by the treaties to listen to the views of civil society, it is actually interested in accessing their expertise. So when we shake our heads at the overwhelming distance between us citizens and the European institutions, remember there is one sure way to make your voice heard, and that is through civil society, working in Europe and in our neighbor countries. So let me end with a twist of a good Marxist slogan, fitting for East Berlin as it were. I suggest civil society in all countries unite. Thank you.